Lee Residential Care in Hamden is a social services program providing residential group housing for disabled adults. And according to court documents obtained by WVII, 3 of its former employees allegedly perpetrated multiple forms of abuse there. Court documents show Rene Dubois of Prospect and Michael Slater of Palmyra have both been charged with multiple counts of endangering the welfare of a dependent person. Joshua Martin of Winterport is charged with 1 count of endangering the welfare of a dependent person and 1 count of assault. One former employee has already pleaded guilty for crimes against 2 individuals who court documents describe as, quote, functionally nonverbal with intellectual disabilities. On August 30th, Zachary Connors of Newburgh was sentenced and will serve 5 years in prison after pleading guilty to 1 felony count of intentionally endangering the welfare of a dependent person. Maine Judicial Branch documents show he's currently out on bail and must report to prison by September 30th. The state of Maine sentencing memorandum for Connors outlines the offense he pleaded guilty to as happening within the time frame of January 1st of 2019 through January 1st of 2022. The document says Connors was hired as a direct service provider at Lee Residential Care in 2017, but says he, quote, learned to be abusive when he was taught by Dubois and Slater, among others. The document calls the behavior grotesque and pervasive and describes examples. 2 were referred to as waterboarding and reset button. The latter is described by the court as choking the victim until they passed out. Another alleged form of abuse was reported by multiple co-workers and involved Connors encouraging residents to engage in sexual activity by bribing them with pizza. Another, named The Spoon, is described in documents as one of the victims being hit in the head with a spoon by both Connors and Dubois. On Thursday afternoon, Rene Dubois pleaded guilty to 1 count of endangering the welfare of a dependent person. Back in September, I reached out to the mother of one of the victims in this case. Last week, she responded and asked to speak with ABC 7 and Fox 22 News following Thursday's sentencing. She asked that her son's name to not be used, but rather his initials, KR.
And I was actually really close to Rene. And he was really close to my son.
On Thursday, inside the Penobscot Judicial Center, Rene Dubois III pleaded guilty to 1 count of endangering the welfare of a dependent person. The 47-year-old of Prospect was sentenced to 5 years with all but 2 suspended. Dubois was asked to report for his incarceration shortly after court was adjourned to the Maine Correctional Center.
I think Patricia Pullen, the Assistant Attorney General, did the absolute best job she could do with a very difficult set of circumstances.
Out of the 4 former employees charged with abusing 2 dependent people at the assisted living facility Lee Residential Care, Dubois is now the second to plead guilty. Back in August, Zachary Connors pleaded guilty to 1 felony count of intentionally endangering the welfare of a dependent person and is currently serving a 5-year prison sentence. Those close to the victims were asked to speak before the court on Thursday. KR's mother, Danielle Longsworth, said she originally didn't plan on speaking, but felt compelled to do so because of the love she has for her son.
I love him. There's nothing I wouldn't do for him. Everything I do for him. I looked him actually in the eye and I told him that my son loved you. My son loved you and he trusted you. And of all the people that you let them hurt him. And also you did not speak up when you could have spoken up.
KR's co-guardian Margaret Longsworth shared with ABC 7 and Fox 22 News the speech she wrote and said before the court on Thursday. That speech in its entirety can be found on our website. Doug Banks reporting in studio for ABC 7 and Fox 22 News. What if the people entrusted to care for your child were suddenly the ones on trial for abusing them? That is the reality one mother is facing. Some time ago, she welcomed me into her home to sit down and speak with her. She asked for her children's faces to not be shown and their names abbreviated. This is part 1 of our 3-part series, Corrosion and Care, in the search for solace.
When he was little, he used to lay underneath the trees and he watched the leaves move. And we just lay there and we'd watch the leaves just gently blow. It just like calmed us right down. He found different ways to soothe himself, and that was one of them.
In January of 1998, Danielle Longsworth welcomed twin boys into the world, CR and KR.
He is funny, witty, clever, and he's a sweetheart. Like, if he knows he hurts your feelings, he can't say it, but he'll just like take his hand and go like this.
At 3 years old, the twins were both diagnosed with autism.
I knew something before they were a year old, actually.
Longsworth says when her son KR was unable to communicate or express emotion, he would headbutt.
Everybody else wanted to hold his brother, but KR, they were just always nervous about him, and I wasn't nervous about him. Because I always wanted KR to know that he was just as important as his brother.
As the twins grew older, they moved through different services until settling at their father's.
It was hard because I felt helpless. You really need to have somebody to help you and support you. And I didn't have anybody to help me. And that's why the boys ended up living with their dad, because I didn't have any help.
By the age of around 17, Longsworth says the boys were taken from their fathers by the state.
CR wrote down on a piece of paper to the teacher, and he said, "Spend the night Mama's house happy." And he went home and he showed it to his dad, and his dad burnt it in front of him.
With help from her sister-in-law, Margaret, KR was moved to a service in Florida.
You know, it was not a good situation there. He got beat up a couple times.
The 1,000 miles away from her son would soon change when the agency her other son was staying at visited KR and agreed to take him in.
So when he got there and he saw his house, he was really happy. I just kept visiting him, constantly, just so he reassured him that nothing's going to happen to him.
With a mother and her 2 sons reunited, a once broken family found solace again.
Just that feeling of finally being, okay, being in a safe place and not knowing that not too long after that is when it started.
In our second installment, we discuss the jarring reality of her son being one of the reported victims of the abuse that occurred at Lee Residential Care. In studio, I'm Doug Banks for ABC 7 and Fox 22 News. In part 1, we told you about a mother finally finding hope after being reunited with her 2 sons and finding the services needed for them. As we share with you now, in the second installment of Corrosion and Care in the Search for Solace, the facility she thought would protect and nurture her sons was anything but.
I can't tell you the anxiety you feel when you don't know your children are safe.
In March of 2022, the Department of Health and Human Services says Adult Protective Services and law enforcement received a report of alleged abuse coming from inside Lee Residential Care, a social services program in Hamden providing residential group housing for disabled adults. Longsworth says she found out through a phone call from an assistant attorney general that her son, KR, was one of the 2 reported individuals abused by their caregivers.
I feel like I should have known this or something. I just was not prepared for what I was going to hear.
It was a pattern of abuse and harrowing behavior between 2019 and 2022 that court documents described as grotesque and pervasive. Court documents described one report during the Christmas season of 2021 when a direct service provider at Lee pressured KR to perform sexual activity on another victim for pizza. After a co-worker informed an administrative assistant in March of 2022 about the alleged abuse, 4 employees from Lee Residential Care were charged with multiple counts of endangering the welfare of a dependent person. Longsworth recalled seeing her son for the first time after learning of the abuse he suffered.
I just hugged him and I just said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you've been through all this. And I love you very much."
She says her and her son had a close relationship with Renee Dubois III, a direct service provider for KR.
I actually called up Renee and I said, "Renee, I need you to be honest with me. Did anything happen to my son?" And he said, "No, I would never do that."
In October, Dubois pleaded guilty to 1 count of endangering the welfare of a dependent person and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Dubois was the second former employee to be sentenced to prison, following Zachary Connors back in August.
My biggest fear is that KR doesn't think he deserves, happiness and love. Like when he was in Florida, I was afraid that he thought I abandoned him or something. But here, and thinking, okay, my mom put me here, and then all of a sudden all these guys, and just hoping inside he doesn't think that, that he deserved to be treated like that. I worry that he thinks that.
Join us Friday night for the conclusion of this 3-part series. In studio, I'm Doug Banks for ABC 7 and Fox 22 News. For the last installment of Corrosion and Care in the Search for Solace, we end this series where it began, with the love between a mother and her son. Because it was their love that remained strong when the miles between them grew longer. It was their love that unspeakable horror could not break. And it is that same love that's carrying them to solace.
I think he has good days and he has bad days, just like anybody else. Moments he's really, really happy, makes me happy. So whatever makes him happy makes me happy.
Longsworth and her family continue to grapple with the reality of the abuse KR suffered at the hands of the former employees of Lee Residential Care. With Zachary Connors and Rene Dubois III currently serving prison time, the cases against Michael Slater and Joshua Martin, who've each pleaded not guilty to their respective charges, are still being worked through the courts.
I still don't feel good about it. I don't feel good about it at all. I hope the time that they spend in jail, that they really think about the things that they've done.
According to Longsworth, it's not the administration she holds resentment over.
She was in shock as well.
But rather, it's the 2 convicted and the 2 accused of inflicting KR's abuse who are the source of her and her family's anguish.
I don't think the agency itself is a bad agency. I think the individuals that did this to him is bad.
As time carries on, so too do the memories and the pain. But for Longsworth and her son,
Look at you smile.
she says they're finding hope from a once hopeless path.
And we're never going to know, because they're both nonverbal, we're never going to know how they really feel about it. But what we can do is continue on our life, giving them love, and I'm going to keep doing the things that I do with him, making sure he's special, because he is, and just continue on our life at the best in our ability. That's all we can do.
As we bring this series to a close, there are 2 things to mention. First, representatives of Lee Residential Care respectfully declined to be interviewed for this series. Second, following my conversation with Longsworth, she insisted that it be clear that she does not blame Lee Residential Care's administration or the agency as a whole, and that she believes the agency is a good agency. She puts the blame for what happened to her son solely on the now former employees. In studio, Doug Banks, ABC 7 and Fox 22 News.